August 15, 1971, the day the world became a simulation. Richard Nixon stepped into the light. He looked into the camera. He spoke of stability. He spoke of the future. It was a lie. Nixon cut the tether. Since the dawn of trade, money had a weight. It had a physical reality. It was anchored to gold. In a single night, the anchor was cut. The dollar was the ship. Gold was the shore. Nixon cut the rope and let the ship drift into an infinite void. Overnight, the wealth of the human race became an illusion. It was no longer a store of value. It was a weapon of faith, a shared hallucination backed by nothing but a central bank committee and the implicit promise of violence. The gold ghost had departed. The empire was naked. The system was hemorrhaging credibility. Without a physical foundation, the currency was a countdown to zero. The architects of power needed a new skin, a new way to force the global collective to believe in a green piece of paper. They needed a new anchor. They found it in the desert. Enter Henry Kissinger, the architect of the shadow. The year was 1974. The empire was reeling from the oil crisis. The dollar was dying. Kissinger flew to Riyadh. He didn't go to discuss peace. He went to draft a Faustian bargain, a pact made in the dark that would define the next 50 years of human history. The terms were cold. The logic was absolute. The United States promised the Saudi kingdom total security, absolute military protection, armor, jets, intelligence. The survival of the throne was guaranteed by the American war machine. In exchange, the Saudis gave the empire the keys to the world. They agreed to price every drop of their oil in US dollars. Only dollars. Any nation that wanted to buy energy had to first buy the dollar. This was the birth of the petrodollar. The dollar was no longer backed by a yellow metal sitting in a vault. It was backed by black blood pumping through a pipeline. The empire had traded a mineral anchor for a metabolic one. The currency was now tied to the very energy required for civilization to function. If you wanted to heat your home, move your army, or run your factory, you had to pay tribute to the Fed. The pact was sealed. The Desert Pact became the invisible cage of the global economy. The genius was brutal. The mechanics were clinical. Because the world needs energy to breathe, every nation on Earth became a captive customer of the American financial system. This created an infinite, artificial demand for the dollar. It didn't matter if the American economy was failing. It didn't matter if their factories were closing. The world still had to buy the dollar to buy the oil. This transformed the dollar into a global toll booth. This allowed the Federal Reserve to achieve the impossible. They could print trillions of dollars out of thin air to fund wars, bailouts, and consumption. Usually, this volume of printing would trigger hyperinflation. It would destroy the currency. But the petrodollar system provided a pressure valve. The empire exported its inflation. Because the entire world was forced to hold dollars for their energy needs, the inflationary pain was spread across the globe. You paid for their printing. Japan paid. Germany paid. Every developing nation struggling to buy a barrel of oil paid an invisible tax to Washington. The petrodollar was a parasite on the global metabolic rate. It allowed the empire to live far beyond its means, while the rest of the world worked to support the value of the paper. The autopsy is beginning. The mask is slipping. 50 years later, the cartel is showing signs of terminal necrosis. The Desert Pact is breaking. The Saudis are no longer whispering in the dark. They are speaking openly. The exclusive deal is over. They are accepting yuan. They are accepting euros. They are joining BRICS. The monopoly on liquid energy has fractured. The mathematics of the fallout are terrifying. When the world stops needing the dollar to buy oil, the artificial demand vanishes. The trillions of dollars currently circulating in the global arteries will have nowhere to go. They will flood back to the source, a tidal wave of paper returning home. The inflation that was exported for 5 decades is now being re-imported. The Federal Reserve can no longer spread the pain. The system is beginning to choke on its own supply. BRICS is not just a trade bloc, it is a bypass, a way for the world to breathe without the American Tollbooth. The decoupling is accelerating. The debt is no longer a tool of power. It is a terminal weight. The liquid foundation is drying up, and the skyscraper is beginning to tilt. The era of black blood backing is entering the final stage of collapse. The empire was never built on gold. It was never built on democracy. It was built on a monopoly of liquid energy. The monopoly is dead. The blood has stopped flowing through the preferred channels. The simulation is crashing. We are witnessing the dismantling of the 20th century matrix in real time. The paper is returning to its intrinsic value, 0. But the architects of the system will not surrender power. If the paper dollar dies, they will not return to gold. They will replace the dying paper with a digital cage, programmable money, a currency that dictates what you can buy, where you can travel, and when your wealth expires. The death of the petrodollar is not the end of the war. It is the justification for the ultimate control grid. In our next autopsy, we dissect the central bank digital currencies, the digital Panopticon. This is the blueprint. Subscribe to decode the rest of the trap.